Hello, this is Elaine Sugar, award-winning children's program facilitator and overall supporter of children's dreams. Welcome to the Empower Teen Self-Esteem podcast. We bring you ideas and resources that help teens shine and help ease parents' minds. Welcome to this episode of Empower Teen Self-Esteem. This is really an exciting day because I have someone whose work I really admire, and I am so glad to introduce her to our audience. So, our teens, whatever you're doing, stop for a moment and pay attention. We have a legend in the house. I want to welcome Shelley Collins. Shelley has years, I should say decades of experience dealing in work that a lot of us tiptoe around. There are a lot of us that are not comfortable having a conversation about cultural difference, any type of diversity topic at all. There's kind of tension in the room when one person is even brave enough to bring it up. Shelley is one of those brave intellectuals that actually engages in those conversations, leads them, designs work to tell those of us who are uncomfortable how to do it. And not only on an individual level, but she's done it for militaries of countries. She's done it for organizations and corporations. So she does this work at a very impactful level. So I cannot wait to get into this discussion. Shelley, welcome to our podcast. How are you?
I am very well, and thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast. I'm excited to, speak with you and hopefully impart some understanding and some knowledge to your audiences.
That is the least of my worries because I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak before. So, before we get into having particular conversations, can you go ahead and just give us an overview of your career? Because there are some very impressive things in your career. So, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience and some of the projects that you've worked on?
Well, my career, if I go right back to the beginning, I arrived in Britain in 1970. I came to train as a nurse. I did general nursing, psychiatry, pediatrics. I was a sister at Guy's Hospital in charge of the children's unit. And I think eventually I came out of nursing because I went into it very young and it was the only thing I had done. So I came out of nursing and I think I wanted to see what else there was. I remember going to a recruitment agency and them saying to me, well, we don't know what to do with you. You're only a nurse. And I thought, what? Given what
Right.
responsibility I had. And that was my first exposure to, if you like, living out in mainstream British society because I'd lived primarily in residence all of my nursing career. So in some ways I had been sheltered from some of the issues that affected, people just in general in life. And I think quite a sheltered life. And from then I went into being headhunted by one of my clients into business administration and training. And that really sparked something in me. I met British born Black people who appeared to be radically different from me. And they would say things like, well, I'm only a minority. I'm thinking, what does that mean? Oh, but I'm ethnic minority. I'm thinking, what does that mean? Because those words didn't resonate for me. If you come from the Caribbean, you identify by your nationality. So I'm a Barbadian, and
Okay.
we have a culture. And yes, there are white Barbadians and Black Barbadians and Chinese Barbadians and Indian Barbadians, but we're all Barbadians. So this sense they seem to have a real lack of identity of like being proud of who they are, standing tall. And I wondered, so what was that about? And eventually I began to be exposed to this thing about race and diversity and how being seen as a minority in a predominantly white country. And I thought, this is weird. And so people thought I was the odd person out because people would say to me, but Shelley, you have ideas above your station. You almost behave like Black people say to me, Shelley, you behave as if you're white. And white people would go, how do you know those things? I'm thinking, That's just part of how I was brought up. You know, I have to confess, I had a very British education in the colonies. I went to a school in Barbados, which at the time was the top school in the island. So I had a thoroughly British education. And so when people, and I came to Britain, I confess it now, and it seems strange, of having, you know, you have a list of things you'd like to achieve and things you'd like to do and places you'd like to go.
Yes.
And I had
Yes.
lists of, you know, yes, I wanted to go to Carnival at Notting Hill, but I also wanted to go to the Proms. I wanted to go and see classical music at the Albert Hall. And I wanted to see Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross, but I also wanted to see ballet in Covent Garden. And people couldn't get their heads around those two things. It's like, well, which
They
one?
wanted you in a box, right?
It's like, well, Black people don't go to the ballet. I'm like, I do.
Hmm.
And Black people don't enjoy classical music. Well, I did.
Mhm.
And yet I didn't do all the things. So people were confused by me. And I thought, well, when I go back to Barbados, I know exactly where I fit, because that's the way I was brought up, to have this broad education, to know about the world, to know about people, not to be put in a box, because back there society had put you in a box. If you lived in a certain area, or you came from a poor family, or you came, then these were the labels that people put on you. And I think my education gave me a break out of that box on the one hand. And so I think you grow up living with all these different identities. Anyway, so then in about 1987, a friend of mine invited me to meet a guy who had just been appointed to create a training center for the police service on police community and race relations. It was just after the Brixton riots and the Toxteth riots, and this was a place to train police officers how to deal with this stuff. And it was a 6-week residential course for police trainers.
Excellent.
And part of that training, by week 3, we would take those police officers and put them to live in the home of an ethnic minority family for a weekend.
Wow.
And that was transformative. And you could, you know, it was radical at the time, and people would get really scared, and people would want to know, you know, what's going to happen. And yet the experiences they came back with often radically shifted their lives. I remember one guy, he said, you know, he went to the home of an Asian family. And when I say Asian, I mean Asian in terms of Indian, Pakistani, or Bangladeshi, not the American definition of Asian, i.e. Korean,
Okay.
or Chinese. Or
Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
and he said they'd been, you know, and they wouldn't arrive in uniform, they'd arrive just in ordinary clothes and whatever. But he said they had been in the house for less than 10 minutes, and that house was under attack. People throwing stones at the windows and dropping stuff through the letterbox. And he said he will never forget, even although he was a police officer, inside that house with those people, to really experience what it's like to be the victim of a racially motivated crime. So it was transformative. It was some of the best experiences I had, and some of the most testing. You know, you'd walk out of the classroom and pull the slings and arrows out of your chest.
Right.
But
Right.
it made a difference. And I would say back then it made a difference, and people did take it, and they did do good work, and they did try and transform their forces. But the challenge about that is those were the individuals that were changed. They then had to go back into the system, into the organization. And then they would be met with comments like, oh, you went to the funny farm. You've now come back all PC. Well, now you've spent time at the funny farm. Let's bring you back down to reality. And those people went back and they had a tough time, because it's like trying to, you know, turn the Titanic. You send back a few people, you can't do it. And although the organization did adapt things and take it on, the most fundamental thing that's lacking in many organizations is a lack of corporate memory. Because that leader, those group of people who did that, embrace it and run with it. But then they move on, they get promoted, they go somewhere else, and a new batch comes through. And guess what? You have to start all over again. Because the systems, the organization does not embed it into their DNA. They don't embed it into their core systems. It becomes a personal battle that individuals fight. And that's why it can be battle weary doing equality and diversity.
Yeah, and I appreciate you breaking it down to that point, because there are some people who don't understand and actually don't believe in systems that oppress people. They don't believe that the construct of systems of government and organizations and corporations are built in such a way that it's inherent that there is racism and discrimination. They don't. So to your point, you took individuals who were a part of a system, you put them in this culture, gave them this education and experience. They were impacted. It helped transform them, but they went back to that organization, that system that's in place, that's operating. And the truth is, a lot of those systems are built in a way that is oppressive to minorities. So you took one person, or you took people, and you did something great, but then you had to send them back to that same environment.
And I think that's the piece that, and that's not just about race or racism. I can point to even within communities. Let's say that you grew up in a certain area, whether it's a poor area or whatever, and you get a scholarship to, let's say, a Harvard or Yale or something, and you go to that place and you learn and you come back skilled and equipped, and you now sound different, you act different, you look different, and then people go, who do you think you are?
That's a very good example. Very good example.
So now you think you're better than us. No, I'm just different. But if you let me, I've learned some things which, if I bring them back, can actually help us deal with some of the stuff. But the minute you just keep it within this construct of race or color or culture, then you lose something. I say to people, for me, the exploration of identity and race and culture, this is not unique just between black and white. I see it in Britain between Black West Indians and Black Africans. I see it between Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims. They're all from the same continent, but there's this thing of difference. And I think some other person's difference challenges our identity when we are not confident and sure of who we are.
Excellent point. And you know what? That then turns the table on all of us to examine ourselves when we're in those situations where someone is showing up different from what we are used to and what we're accustomed to. That's a very good way to turn the tables and have us all look at ourselves in the mirror when those moments arise. So how do you train through that? Because if part of that is part of our humanity, part of us just being human beings, how do you train through that?
I think you have to start, first of all, I often say, before you can look at other people, you need to take a look at yourself. And so my question often is like, who are you? If I said to you, who are you? How would you define yourself? Now, some people will jump straight and say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a nurse. They define themselves by what they do. That gives them themselves, and that positions them in society, a certain status or a certain level of income, or there's some expectations that come with those definitions. Yeah. Other people will define themselves by what they have. I'm a Tesla owner. I own this, I own that, I have this, I have that, by what they wear. They will make statements about themselves by they only wear these types of clothes, or they only wear these brands. And again, that says something about them in terms of how they define themselves. But I break that down. I say, okay, your job or that label is what you do. What you wear is what you wear. My question is, who are you? When you're not wearing that stuff, when you're not wearing that label, who are you? Are you clear of who you are? The next
I
step,
think that's a good, I'm sorry. I wanted to touch on that point about your label and what you wear, because a lot of our teenagers see celebrities on TV and videos, magazines. They look at their Instagram accounts and they have this certain watch or these certain shoes. Um, and so when you have the opportunity to get some of those things, you can feel so proud of that thing. Oh, I have this watch like so and so was wearing. And so everyone knows that I had to pay X amount of dollars for it. So, uh, how do you explain to young people that it is all right to have nice things, but not to let it define you literally? So if I can't afford that $300 watch and I have to wear a $30 watch, how do I not let that define me? Suppose my parents are buying me the $300 watches, or suppose I have my own job and I'm purchasing it and it makes me feel good because, ABC celebrity had it on and now all of my friends will know that, I have this cool thing.
I, I think you can't help that. That's what I talk about, the impact of culture and socialization. So let me take it back, and I want this for the young people and for parents to understand. We need to be clear what impacts us, and I don't make a judgment call about it, but just the process. I want to take it right back to the beginning. And there's a guy called, he's an American guy called Morris Massey, who talks about the impact of culture and socialization. And he made this interesting phrase. He says, who you are is where you were when. And you think, what? Who you are is where you were when. And I remember thinking when he said that, and the first thing that came to my mind was my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. My grandmother always had a bottom drawer, and in that bottom drawer was always towels and soap and night dresses and whatever. And you say, Gran, she said, just in case I go to hospital, just in case. She always had a cupboard with tin food, just in case. And I used to say, well, and she said, well, when you've lived through the war, you always have a bottom drawer. So you see, who she was being was out of where she was when she went through the war. Every piece of paper she would fold up and keep, because you didn't throw things away. You mended things. You didn't just chuck them in the bin. So her entire set of core values comes out of her life experience. And it goes right back to, and this is important for parents to understand their young people and young people to understand their parents. So let me take it right back. There's a Jesuit priest that says, give me the child until they're 7 and I will give you the man.
Absolutely.
And what that thing says is, from the age of 0 to 7, I don't know if you've ever seen little ducklings following the mother. There's a process that we go through called imprinting. Whatever the parents say or do, you watch those little ducklings, it's imprinted on your brain. I don't know about you, but really little children can really get you in a lot of trouble. I've never heard them, but mommy said. You're thinking, no, I'm meant to say that. What mommy said. Mommy says to tell you that she's not at home.
I love it.
You're like, no, you don't meant to do that.
Yes.
And you'll hear people. I had a friend of mine, and he was a police officer. He said he was standing in the kitchen doing something, and his 3-year-old daughter came in, and she'd been waiting to go out with him, and she stood there and she said, Dad. He said, he said, and it was the pose. Her hand was on her hip and her finger was out, and she said, Dad, I'm losing the will to live.
Oh.
It was an exact replica and repetition if you like,
Oh,
gesticulation exactly like his wife would say it.
yes.
She was
Yeah.
imprinting. And so one of the things as parents, and it scares me at times looking back, is our kids absorb everything we say,
Yes.
the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And so we cannot, when we see a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, whatever, saying and doing certain things, where did they pick it up?
Hmm.
Traditionally, from 0 to 7, it used to be in the home, where you had some control over the input of who said what to your children. Well, today we have these.
Yes, we do.
We have iPads. We have 7-year-olds are hearing things that I never heard until I was 21. They're
Hmm.
watching things that I still don't watch. My kids
Yes.
will tell you, if I hear the sound of a bit of music that like it could be in a horror movie, I turn it off. Seriously, I cannot tolerate it. I'm like, no. But
Yeah.
I know kids, when you talk to them and they go, I've watched The Exorcist. How old are you? 6. You're like, what?
You know what you remind me of, talking about how well they can use technology. I was on a plane one time and I had a phone that I hadn't had that long. And the little boy, he looked like he was about 6 years old. And he asked me, he said, "Did you turn your phone on airplane mode?" And I said, "No, I didn't." He took it out of my hand and put it on airplane mode before his mom could even stop him and tell him, "You don't take somebody else's phone." He already knew how to do it. And he hadn't used my phone before. So yes, they definitely know. You see little 5-year-olds with iPads working them very well.
They do.
It's amazing.
My 7-year-old grandson, was it last week? I was at his place and he was on it. He said, Nana, can I borrow your iPad? I've been creating some vectors for my presentation at school. I'm like, I'm in my head, I'm going, what's a vector? Then he
Yeah.
showed me. He was doing presentation, but it wasn't just a slide presentation. He was going to put it on this cube and then the cube can flash each. And I'm like, at 7, you know how to do that?
It's impressive.
My
It's
4-year-old daughter, my
impressive.
daughter was 4 years old. She taught my mother, who was at the time probably about 60 something or 50 something, how to use a computer. She said,
Mhm.
she said, Grandma Norma, you don't have to be afraid of a computer. I'll show you. And she's standing on a chair. She taught my
That
mom
is
how to use a
adorable.
computer. I'm like, wow. So we have to take a bit of responsibility
Yes.
to be the guardians of the souls of our children. Do
Mhm.
we guard their eyes? Do we guard their ears? Do we guard what they see? Do we care what they see? Because whatever goes in is what's going to come out. And if you have no control over that, then don't be surprised by what's coming out.
Wow,
Because
that's a
0
really
to
powerful
7
point.
used to be parents. It used to be called, if you like, imprinting. That's why if you look in Europe, for example, most European countries do not send their children to school until they're 7.
Oh, is that right?
And they say it's because those first years are so precious,
Wow.
where the parents are the main ones that are going to get the opportunity to imprint.
Mm.
Now, most societies, given we're industrialized, kids went to school at 5, now it's 4, now we've got nurseries, now we've got kindergartens, and they're in nurseries from the time they're like, what, 6 months old, 8 months old, 1 year old. So now who's inputting into your
Wow.
children? Who's
Every
inputting
worker there.
those core values, that sense of right and wrong? Who sets the moral framework for your children? Who sets the core values of what's important? Who sets the filters to protect their precious souls? If there's no protection, then don't be surprised what your kids are seeing or what your kids are doing. And
You
sometimes,
know,
sorry,
no, 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 you can go ahead.
I said sometimes it is now scary to see what our kids are exposed to, the language that they have. You know, I love great musicians, but when I see 3-year-old kids being sold and modeled clothes so they can look like Beyonce in their little bikinis, and they can shake their tushy and they can work at 3.
Yeah. It's scary.
It's scary, but yet for many people it's normal, because that's what we do. That's what we expose our kids to. Isn't that being trendy and modern and free thinking? Yes, but it damages.
Has an impact.
Of course it
You
has.
know what? Talking about social and cultural impacts, when we first spoke, you told me um, you compared how a person is raised to show respect within their family, within their culture. And then when you interact with a police officer, what they expect in that interaction for you to show respect can be different from your culture. Would you mind talking about that and then giving that example? Because I thought that was so profound.
It's across all cultures. So for example, if you were an American company sending, say, someone abroad, you will do what's called cultural preparation. They will get briefed on what's the signs of respect, of language, of what. And so we tend to know that about people abroad. You know, we learn the right thing to do. But what happens within our societies where cultures, you're in a society, but you grow up in what I call pockets of culture. So for example, raised in the West Indies, I was taught from a very young age that when you're interacting with someone older than you or someone in a position of authority, it is completely disrespectful to hold and maintain eye contact. My grandmother would say, don't let your eyes and mine make four. In other words, when I'm talking to you, you look down to show respect. And then when I'm ready to tell you off, you're going to look at me. And she would say, look at me when I'm talking to you, like that finger. And so there's a difference between I'm listening, but I'm making sure I'm not, because she would say, don't let your eyes and mine make four. Don't be feisty. In other words, don't try and back chat me. So you grow up with that. In British culture, whether you're going for an interview, whether you're a police officer, British culture, the expectation is when you are speaking to someone in a position of authority, the way you show respect is to hold and maintain eye contact. And I say, and in fact, I asked the opposite question because they are triggered when you don't. And I said, so what's the trigger? What happens? What do you read? They say, the minute I'm talking to you and you're looking away, you're looking to either side. That's either shifty, you've got something to hide, you're lacking confidence, you're disrespectful. And I'm thinking, no. Because if I'm raised in a culture where you don't hold eye contact and you're in a culture that expects me to hold eye contact, what you have is a complete miscommunication. And one of the interactions when we looked at the stuff around race and interaction with the police is that for the Black community, that's what you do. You look down. And if you get uncomfortable, you shift around a bit. I call you shuffle, you're backwards because you're nervous. And your grandmother, if your grandmother's going to tell you off, she's going to tell you off, but she might actually throw something at you. So you're getting ready to run.
You're prepared. You're just like, how's this going to go?
But what happens is, so interaction, police officer stops you, asks you what you're doing. I'm fine. Where are you going? I'm going there. I'm talking to you. In other words, I'm expecting you to look at me and you're not. And then often what will happen, the police officer will raise his voice and say, look at me when I'm talking to you. That's like a trigger of grandmother, which is, this is serious. So now you will go from not holding eye contact to holding and maintaining eye contact to show I am paying full attention. In culture, when you suddenly go from not looking, not only are you looking, but now you're holding and maintaining eye contact. And often what they will do is step up to the police officer to show I'm paying attention, what is that interpreted as? Aggressive, challenging. Now you're challenging authority. Now you're disrespecting me. And that is the basis of lots of, and so when we train police officers, we talk about we train them to police a diverse community. And we do lots of scenarios. That's, if you like, the classic young black guy on the street. But you have, let's say, Muslim women or Asian women who, within the culture, and some Orthodox Jewish women, you would not go, if you go to the house and you knock on the door and she's there on her own, she's not going to open the door to you, not as a lone woman with no man there to protect her, or for the neighbors to see her letting a man into the house, which is completely disrespectful. So she won't answer the door. And the police officer is now thinking, well, what have you got to hide? Who's in there? And she's going, I can't open the door. My husband's not here. My son's not here. And so it's about, if when you live and work in a multiracial, multicultural environment, we need to train you to be cross-culturally competent. Do I know the difference? And I would say it's the same thing. If I look at America, I find there are, within the American culture, there's your Southern culture, there's your Californian culture, there's your New York culture, there's your whatever. And if you don't understand that, you can misread what people are saying, what people are doing. And my question within community, people go, well, that's just my culture. Well, fine. But if you're going to operate in a multiracial, multicultural environment, you need to understand other people. You need to be able to operate in that. You need to be able to go, okay, where am I? Who am I with? Not that you're changing you, but you are acquiring linguistic and cultural communication skills. And that doesn't diminish you. In fact, what that does is it enhances your understanding of humanity. It just takes nothing from me to do that. And I think that's where we get sort of, well, this is the way I am. And if you don't like it, you lump it. Well, I don't have to lump it down with the boss that was about to hire you. I'm not talking about your style. I'm not talking about, but there are things which we need to skill and equip our young people to be able to operate in a diverse world.
So what do you think?
Sorry.
What do you think some of the things that, so I'm thinking about being a teenager and hearing this, and possibly that person saying, well, I don't travel. I don't, go to these other places and other cultures. So, my neighborhood, I go to school in my neighborhood. I play after school in my neighborhood. Everybody around here is about the same. So why would I even pay attention to this cultural diversity and studying other cultures?
You don't even have to study cultural diversity, because all I laid out was 0 to 7. 7 to 14 is often where your teenagers are sitting. And it's that then where in that point, I don't know if it happened to you when you were small, it's like, why do you want that? Because everyone's got one. We have our models, we have our heroes and our heroines. We want to be like the film star. We like to be like that person. We're modeling ourselves on them because they are our icons. The challenge is, that's just a model. That's not reality for you of where you are. Look at football stars and cricket stars and people. Why? Because everyone. But that's the second phase of your socialization. The third stage, and I guess it depends on the age range, is often used to be, you leave school or you're going to work in the workplace and you learn your social skills. You learn about turning up on time. You learn about doing complete work. So what Massey says is that your core values, your sense of what makes you the person you are, starts at 0, and by the time you're 21, your core values are embedded, good, bad, or indifferent. And the only thing that will alter and change those is something he calls an SEE, a significant emotional event, which stops you in your track and you reassess. And I would say, given the last year we've all been through, many people are experiencing,
Yeah.
have had significant emotional events that has rocked them to their core and made them completely reassess what their core
Mm-hmm.
values are. For some, it's George Floyd. For some, it's
Yeah.
COVID. For some, it's losing their jobs. For some, it's the complete shutdown of their communities. For some, it's a complete loss of anything that gives them their sense of identity. Those young people who bought the watch, that had the clothes, suddenly they can't go out and show anybody those clothes anyway because you're in lockdown. You can't go to
Wow.
the restaurant that you went to flaunt your stuff so everybody can see you. There's nowhere to go. So how do I
Mm-hmm.
maintain this? How will they know who I am? I can't go and show it off with my friends. I can't talk about the latest movie because there's no latest movie on the cinema. How am I going to reassert the sense of who I am? And the question becomes, who am I when none of that stuff is available?
Hmm.
Who am I?
So if you've put all of yourself, for my young people who are listening, into what you purchased so that when people see you, they can know that you could afford this item. What about in situations where you can't go and show those things off? That's why Shelley is saying you need to work on and understand who you are without all of those things, because what do you become if you don't have access to those things? If there's unfortunately a house fire and those things get burned up, you still exist. So who are you? That's why you want to work on yourself and not focus all of the effort on where you work, what you wear. Beautiful point. Very powerful point.
And I think also, what your friends do. Some friends will do things that you can model, but other friends may do things that aren't good for you. And you need to be able to make that choice yourself. Because if you don't have your own rudder, if you don't have your own sense of, well, is this the right thing for me or not, you're just a sheep. You're just
Mm-hmm.
following. And before you know it, you're in places that you never intended to be and doing things you never intended to be. And you're then at the effect of your circumstances. And I was reading an article the other day. This woman was saying she had a rant. I was on Twitter or something, maybe Instagram or something. And she said this young girl came up to her and said, "Oh, I love your lashes. What are they? Are they number 9? And where did you buy them?" And she said, "I was upset because they're mine. They're not number 9. They're not anybody's." People look at her hair and say, "Oh, is it a weave?" She says, "No, it's my hair." And so what you see is the false reality that we have created now make people actually question the authenticity of others. So every hairstyle you see is not a weave, that's someone's real hair. Every skin
Mm-hmm.
tone you see is not a bleaching cream. There's a variety of skin shades. And so can you see how distorted our life has become,
Yes.
where we can look at something that is real and think it's false? That
Yeah,
is,
I appreciate you sharing that video with me. I watched the entire thing and you could just feel her frustration. And I remember at one point in that video, she said, the sad part of it is we're sending the message that when you see something that's beautiful, that means it's fake. There's no authentic beauty. The things that are authentic are not beautiful. So when I see your nails and they look beautiful, I'm assuming that those must be fake because they're beautiful. Your hair looks beautiful, so it must be fake. And so yes, I listened to every minute of that. And yeah, that was something that I think a lot of our
and that's
teens
sad.
should watch.
That's sad. And the challenge for us, I will say for me, I noticed, let's say in the Black community, is that
Hmm.
we will spend exorbitant amounts on those things, but we won't spend exorbitant amounts on educating ourselves and learning about I do workshops, I do training for people, and somebody will go and spend $500 on a pair of Manolo Blanc shoes or $1,000, and you say, "Come away for this weekend retreat and discover about your identity and your purpose and your value." You say, how much is it? You say 500. Nah, I'm not paying that sort of money. Can't you give it to me for free? You can't walk into the shop and buy those pairs of shoes for free. And yet you won't invest in yourself. You don't think that you are a person of value and worth, that thing that you do that will change your life, that good food you will eat instead of eating chicken from the chicken barn every day and filling your body with cholesterol. And somebody says, actually, here's this health product. Will you eat that? I don't like that. I'm black. I only eat this and this and this. Yeah, but it's killing you. We're overrepresented in diabetes and hypertension. Oh, but that's my culture. That's my food. And you can't tell me what to eat or what to do. Well, we won't. You'll just die. That's why we have these underlying health issues that have us disproportionately impacted by some of these things. But nobody can tell me what to do. Are we learning? Are we
It's called tough love, right? It's called tough love. We have to have those conversations with ourselves.
We do. And also we have to point our children in the right direction. You know, when you don't have the money, what do? When you can't afford it, does that mean that you're less than? No.
Good
You
question.
can walk into a public library and and sit down and read books. You don't have to have the latest thing so you can read the book on the Kindle. Go in the library and read the book if you really want to read the book. Or do you just want to show people you've got it on your Kindle? And for me, it's about, unless I can believe in life that I am enough, that who I am is a gift to this planet, that who I am, because of my willingness to work hard and learn and take my time. You know, one of the things someone said to me, who's a Jewish rabbi, and he said to me, he said, you know, one of the key things that you learn as a young Jewish person that makes life worthwhile is delayed gratification. That thing
Can you define that, just in case our young people are not sure what delayed gratification is?
Delayed gratification used to be, in my day, I call it, you see something, you want it, you find out the price, and they tell you, and you know you don't have the money now, but you save up to get it. And the day you get that thing, it's like you've won the jackpot. You know why? Because it's your money. You saved. It's yours. You don't owe anybody. Nobody's going to come and take it away from you. It's not on a credit card that then is going to haunt you. It is delayed gratification. It's like watching someone prepare a meal for you and waiting to eat it. We don't do delayed gratification. In fact, we've gone the other extreme. Far from delayed, we spend next month's salary now because we can put it on the credit card, and then we spend the next 2 months' money and put that on the credit card. And in fact, we have nothing to look forward to except paying off our debts.
Wow.
We don't. It's like, I want it and I want it now. And that's because the generations shift. So if you look, and this idea of, you hear people talk about the baby boomers and the generation X, and every generation, those values used to change every 10 years. So you can talk about the 50s, and I guarantee if you took a group of people born in the 50s, they will have similar core values. The 60s, different core values, because what was going on in society also shaped your values at the time.
Right.
And again, that depends where you are. If I say 60s music in Britain, they go the Beatles and I'm going Motown and different streams, different values. Civil rights. For some people it's Martin Luther King. For other people it's John F. Kennedy, depending what stream you're in. So different circumstances in life will shape your values. That's why if you did not grow up in the 60s, you do not have any knowledge of the civil rights movement, you won't understand a thing about what's this. I tell you, the pandemic did the world an incredible favor and an opportunity to see what happened to George Floyd. If there had been no pandemic, the world would not have witnessed that newsreel. The world would not have seen with their eyes what happened and could judge for themselves the outcome and go, what?
Yeah.
Because normally you wouldn't have seen that. Do you see what I mean? And then it's your word against mine and this community. But everyone saw. And I remember, I'll share with you, I was on LinkedIn, and someone on LinkedIn, somebody made a comment about the George Floyd event. And I can't remember, some person said something like, yes, I'll never forget. It said, but did you see the incident? And did you see the arrest? And before you make any judgment? And I almost lost all my Jesus.
Wow.
And my reply was, did you see the arrest? I put, it was live on television, the world saw. Did you gather the evidence? I said, the evidence was very clearly recorded by someone everyone saw. The outcome of the case, he died in public. Now draw your conclusions. Like, what?
He died with people begging the police officer to get off him and let him breathe. People were actually begging him.
People were begging. And for me, that's the thing. You have a generation, global generation, that incident has changed their perspective and affected their core values. And people who would never, ever have stood up against injustice when that was a step too far.
Yes.
Across the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant emotional event that woke people up. And I don't like the politicizing of the word woke, but it's like people went, whoa. You can't do that in my name. You can't do that and say you represent me.
That's right.
There was a value shift.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how do we respond? Not react, respond. And that's where the honing of character is important for young people. Because there's a saying that character is formed in the moment between when something happens to you and how you choose to respond.
Wow.
You can react. That's reaction. That's not character. That's not what Martin Luther King was talking about when he said, you consciously choose to turn the other cheek. You consciously choose to act in certain ways, not because you're reacting, but actually who I am, my value of myself, my identity, my self-worth. I am going to, if you like, I'm staring you down with my goodness. You can do all the bad stuff you do, but I know who I am. Now go on, make my day.
Yeah.
That's the character I want our young people to have. To be able to stand for values, not of what's next and no, what do I stand for? What do I believe? What's important to me? Because if you don't stand up for anything, you'll sit down for everything. Who am I? Do I know what's, if you like, right and wrong? Not before man, but actually for myself. And unless we put some dimension of understanding who you are, and whether you're a person of faith or not is irrelevant. But my scientific brain tells me that I am a person, I am a spirit. What do I mean by that? When I listen to myself speak, or you speak, we will say, I think. So there must be an I doing the thinking. So I'm not my thoughts. I think thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I have feelings. I'm not my emotions. I have emotions. So there's an I that clearly has the choice and control about how I speak, how I feel, how I react, how I respond. I am not an automaton that you can just press a button and bang, I react. No, we have choice. And it's in those moments we need to teach choice. We need to teach just thinking, why did I react that way? What was that about? What triggered me? Who am I? And why did that? And actually, sometimes we'll notice that before we could even think it through, there was a reaction. And that tells us that we are not in control of who we are. We're triggered by life. We're triggered by things. We're triggered by emotions. And then you can't go through life triggered forever. There's a point where you must sit down and say, this is how I feel. But we don't do that. We hide our feelings with our emotions. No, brush it off. Don't talk to me. We bravado it, when in fact what's inside is we're hurting. I know when I was young, if I was really, really upset, angry, upset, trying so hard not to cry because I was so angry, tears would run down my eyes. And then people would go, oh, don't get upset, which made me even more angry.
Yes.
Because we can use different things to mask how we feel. And I think in today's society, we need safe places, safe spaces. And I don't use that word in terms of the politically correct, but we need someone somewhere where we can go to and say, I feel a bit lost. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to react that way. I didn't mean to cuss out my mum, but before I knew it, I was. And then she's upset and I'm upset. And now there's nothing. Because until we can have those conversations, you know, we live in a body. We have a will, we have emotions, we have feelings. And unfortunately, we live in a society that says that that's all we are. People say there is no God. Well, if there isn't something outside of this, then what's the point? No, seriously.
What is all this for, right?
If according to science, we're a big bang that we all just happen to be molecules just mashed up together, and here we are, and we are just a bunch of molecules talking to another bunch of molecules, we can as well all go home.
What is the point?
Who are you? And I think many young people have this sense of, I'm here for a purpose. Sometime in their early life, it's like, I can do great things. I can be somebody. I can do something. And sometimes life beats that out of them. Circumstances beat that. Or the same community you're in is like, oh, what do you mean you're going to be that? Who do you think you are?
That's
you
true.
come from this block and you can't go there and you can't do that. And we destroy the dreams of our young people.
Wow.
Because we didn't get out of the ghetto, we don't want them to get out of the ghetto. Your friends will do that to you. Because
what do you say to someone who may be feeling that way, maybe thinking, oh, well, when I was a little younger, I did have dreams to do this, or I was planning to do that. I did feel like I could succeed, but now I'm in a place where, you know, I don't feel like I can do much more than I'm doing now. What if they're at that point where they're starting to give up? Then what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at your podcast of Empower Teen and Self-Esteem, which is about you need to find places
Yes.
who are willing to empower you, to build up your self-esteem, to spend time exploring these things, having these important questions and debates. So I run a program for women, young women, called Women of Value and Worth.
Okay.
You know, looking at what does it mean? What is your value and what is your worth and how do you define that? And having a look at some of those things of the seeds that were planted in your life that, you know, leave a legacy. What do I mean by that? I've heard parents say to kids, you're not going to grow up to be anything. You're going to be a waste of space. You know, you're worse than this. And then you wonder why the kid gives up. You're going to be just like your worthless father. You're just going to be like your blah, blah, blah mother. And then you wonder why they turn out that way, why they lose hope.
That's beyond sad. And it's so impactful to your point, your imprinting. So we definitely, as adults,
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely as adults need to realize that our words are creating our children's future in a lot of cases.
What we often do is we say to our kids, do as I say, but then they look at us and then we tell them, don't do as I do, because we're not modeling what we're saying. We say one thing and we do something else. And somehow we expect them, and guess what? They model what they see. They will walk like you, talk like you, act like you, do all the same deceitful things that you do when you think no one's looking. They'll listen to your conversations on the phone of how you backbite your friends and backbite your mates and tell lies and do this. And then you wonder why they're doing the same thing. They're role models of you. And so we need to understand about how we communicate. We understand I learned from my daughter and from people around me that, sometimes we are very functional in our communication. Go here and do this and come here and do that. And that's all they hear is orders, but very little heart communication in terms of, I'm really proud of you. I love you. I know you didn't do well there, but it's okay. We all make mistakes. Forgive me, I was wrong. As parents, when we can apologize to our children, that is a huge, huge, huge deposit of humility that they learn. And you can say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I just realized that when I said that, I really hurt you. And I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just angry. Because then you're modeling that they can do the same as well.
That is wonderful. And that's not something I hear a lot. So I'm glad you mentioned it, that you can actually apologize to your children when you're wrong. And that moment can be more impactful than whatever the thing was that, you ended up apologizing for. They remember that, and that can be impactful.
It is. And valuing their contribution. Again, I think back to the Caribbean and upbringing where in the old days, like children were heard and not seen. You couldn't, you'd come with your precious thing you created and, the little papers with the drawings and whatever. It's like,
yes,
value it. But it's like, I'll bring that funny paper in here for us, right way. You've just destroyed their hearts, destroyed their lives. You've not valued what they've brought to you, And so I think culturally, there are cultural differences I see, and that produces differences in different groups of people, and not all cultures all do the same things, but I see it across the spectrum. If you've not been valued, if you've not been encouraged to speak for yourself, do we as families sit down and hear what the children have to say? And when the child begins to speak, no one else speaks. And wait until they're finished and ask them if they're finished and say thank you and have a conversation? Or do we just, in the melee of families and societies and cultures, just carry on talking? Everybody's shouting to get their voice heard.
Yeah.
Because that's the same child who, when they're now a teen, they're going for an interview and the teacher's saying, speak up. They don't know how to speak up because they've not practiced speaking up at home. They've never had the opportunity to speak up in company. They've never had an opportunity to be heard by adults. And I say this out of reflection of my own upbringing, of my own parenting, and watching my daughter parent and learning from the next generations and the next generations and the next generations, because sometimes you can't see your own mistakes.
And you know what? That's something as much educating of governments and militaries and police forces that you've done. Obviously, a full range of experience. And you're saying you are still learning at this point. So,
yeah. I learn every time. I must be about 2 or 3 years ago, I was asked to go to Saudi to do training. And I was like, Saudi, oh my days. And all the stereotypes in my mind. And I thought, well, I know what the rules are. And I remember going to this place in Shepherd's Bush Market where there's a lady that sells, she sells the clothes that I needed to have, the veil I needed to wear, the
Yes.
headscarf. And I asked her, I said, listen, I'm good. And I said, what should I wear? And she was so good. She said, right, Saudi, you're not going to Dubai. So this is what you need to wear. This is how you wrap it. And she taught me.
Mm-hmm.
And I practiced. And I learned the cultural things. I said, and she said, remember that in that culture, she said, the practice is that you will only hold the hand of a woman who is your wife, your daughter, or your mother, because it's quite or sister, because that's quite an intimate thing to do. So it's not that they're being sexist. Actually, it's about honoring you. Okay, not
Oh,
being
okay.
familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, when I got to the company, I got introduced to the CEO, and the head of personnel introduced me, and he put his hand out for me, and I to shake the guy's hand, and I didn't. And he looked at the CEO, looked at the guy and said, Ahmed, you know? And I said, yes, I know. I said, I didn't expect you to shake your hand. I said, because I understand that is a very intimate and personal thing that you would reserve for your wife, your mother, your daughter. And he looked at me, and he was like, thank you for learning. And I said, because if I'm going to be effective here, I need to
Mm-hmm.
know how to operate. And he said to me, the reason I've invited you here, he said, because we know how to operate inside the kingdom. What we don't know how to do is to operate outside the kingdom. And if we're going to send people out as, if you like, business envoys and person, we need to know how to behave out there.
Hmm.
And I think that's the same for all of us. I can never assume I know anything and everything.
Hmm.
And even something I think I know about a group of people, this individual may not act that way. That's why we talk about valuing difference and diversity.
Yes.
No two Muslims may be the same. No two Christians may be the same. You know, there's Americans, there's Southern Americans and Northern Americans and Native Americans, and all, they're all Americans, but they're different because they express
Mm-hmm.
it through their culture, their upbringing, the location they're in, their religion, their dress. Look at the Amish. They're Americans, but they live by 16th, 17th century rules in 21st century America. They're still Americans. And so if we say we value diversity, it's not about having everyone become the same. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
Right.
If I value your diversity, I will try and understand it, and the same way allow you to understand mine and value it. So I don't have to agree with you, but for me, a true democracy is I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend your right to say it. That's
Ah.
democracy. Because the minute I take away your right for saying it, guess what? You have then the right to take away my right. And that's the thing around language. You can't say, come on. Language evolves and changes over time. If you call my grandmother black, she would slap you. Because in her day, she was called the colored people. And that's the polite word she understood. If you
Ah.
call my brother colored, he'll slap you because he was right on Black Power activists and wanted to
Uh-huh.
behead you. Now people call themselves African Americans and Native American. Well, it's like, what's the new phrase? Every generation will name itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about what's relevant for them. And you can't force people to do things, and you can't impose on others. The question is about who are you? How do you define yourself? If you're born in America, you're a Black American. My question is, what does that mean for you? And have you understood what that full inheritance is?
Mm.
So that when someone tries to deny you of it, you know who you are. You know what your inheritance is. You know what your rights are. You know what the law says. I don't have to be out shouting, but bring it to the table. Bring it to the table. Because I know that I know that I know who I am.
And that's a question you started out with when we first started talking. So that perfectly brings it back to that, because that lets us know that you're consistent and you mean what you say when you tell us we need to focus on making sure we understand who we are and it's not about these things. So you have shared so much information today. My teen should be loaded up. My parents should be loaded up. We should be good to go. I did want to ask you, and I want my young people to use their phones, their iPads, whatever it is they want to use to look up this Nobel Peace Prize winner, Bishop Desmond Tutu. If you all don't know who that is, Shelley, why don't you just take a moment, because a lot of the parents out there will definitely recognize this name. Some of our young people will Google it for the information. But just tell us about the work that you did with Bishop Desmond Tutu and how that came about.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a good friend of mine, her name is Alexander Anker. She was the chief exec of the Tutu Foundation in the United Kingdom. And it came at the time where there was still lots of, after the riots, the poll tax riots in Britain, and there was a lot of tension in communities. And she wanted to bring his work of truth and reconciliation that he had done in South Africa, what is called the spirit of Ubuntu, into that. And so she asked me, because I design training courses, if I would be willing to design a program to take into communities to train people how to facilitate conversations for change in conflict areas. And so it was a 2-day program we designed, and I had the privilege of training. In the end, it was about 270 facilitators in communities, not only in the UK, London, and throughout the UK, but I had the opportunity to go to South Africa and work with him at his location, did work in his community, but also train facilitators there. And then in, I think it was 2017, 18, I can't remember, he and his daughter wrote a book called The Book of Forgiveness, which is about bringing reconciliation. And I had the honor of hosting the book launch of that at Southwark Cathedral. And it was such an incredible opportunity. And there was something, I think, that got imparted, which has never left me, which is, you know, this sense of, when I know who you are, I can work with you. When I know who I am, I can serve you. Because serving you takes nothing away from me. In fact, it enhances me. And so that sense of serving others, you know, that be willing to lay down your life in the pursuit of a good outcome, of peace. Jews would call it shalom, the peace of God. That when you can see, and his work, you know, some of the videos that we watch, when you can see the mother of a soldier, of a person that's been shot by a soldier in the same room as the soldier that shot them.
Wow.
Come to the table and have her questions answered and have the soldier apologize, and restoration is done. It is one of the most moving things you will ever see. Because what it does, it's about, people would say, the humanity in me, meeting the humanity in you. But I would say, especially when we call ourselves, let's say, Christians, and lots of people in the world are Christians, the question for me is, does the Jesus I say live in me meet the Jesus that you say live in you when we communicate? because that's a whole different conversation than me, Shelley, with my history, my culture, my background, meeting you with your history and your culture and your background, and we're now at an impasse.
Mm.
Am I willing to lay down my being right so that we can make progress? Because some people see that as weakness.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most powerful things you can do when you yield. When you say, you know what, that was not my intention.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, I didn't realize. I've seen communities where young people say to old people, until you said that, I didn't realize what it is like to be 80 on your own and scared. And that when we kick the ball against the door, it makes you so scared that you think you're going to die or that we're going to come in and do you harm. I am so sorry. I didn't know that.
Hmm.
And the woman say, actually, you know what? I'm only scared because I spend every day on my own. And then the kid turns and says, well, would it be okay if my sister and I can run and have tea with you? So you're not on your own.
Oh.
And we build from fractured communities. We go from conflict to reconciliation because I see the humanity in you and you see the humanity in me. And that's the common ground on which we build. And unless we do this in this continuing fractured world that we're in, rather than identifying our differences that keep us further and further apart, and we create a language that makes me right and you wrong and do this and do that, we do not have a snowflake in hell's chance of making it. We have to be willing to reach out. We have to be willing to say, you know what, in this community, I'm not going to settle for this. I'm not going to settle for my kids not finishing school. I'm not going to settle for not having this. I'm not going to settle for this. I want more. And you know what? I'm not going to ask the state to do it. I'm not going to ask somebody to do it. I'm going to make my commitment. If my kids can't read and I can, we're going to sit down and read together. And if your kid can't, I'm going to read for them. And we are going to do it together so that we create the community that is actually of benefit for our children in our community. And you don't have to do it for me. That's a life of sacrifice for the betterment of our children. They say there's nothing greater than someone lays down their life for someone else.
It's true.
And so we have to. If we don't lay something down for the next generation and give them hope and give them life and give them a sense of belonging, if we don't pull them and say, tell us your dreams and tell us your hopes, and not destroy them, but help them build them, then we could as well go home. You know, so for me, it's about equipping and empowering people to discover who they are, the gifts they have inside, helping them uncover their dreams, helping them facilitate that, and being the best them that they are. That doesn't mean you have to be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. If you are ordained to be a 1, be the best 1 you could ever be. If you're a 5, be the best 5. You don't have to compare, because what 5s do are different from what 10s do, but just be the best you. And that's what we must encourage each other to be. You know, I met you and your face and your commitment to young people inspired me. And I thought, what can I say and what can I do to contribute to that? You know, so that there's another voice alongside yours saying
well, you have done that. You have done that. To our young people, this is what you call being poured into. Just, I think a lot of our older listeners will definitely understand, but to our younger listeners, this is what we mean when we say we have been poured into. It's when someone is kind enough and generous enough to take their experiences, their knowledge, they gained a lot of time over years, and they give you that. They share that with you. They enlighten you. Shelley, you get the poured into award if there is one. And it comes so naturally. We are fortunate to have you. I am honored as I can be to have you. And I look forward to anything we can do in the future together. You are a wonderful human being. You have done some amazing work around the world. And so it is an honor to have you here. And I want to make sure that we let everyone know exactly how they can get in touch with you. You want to tell them about your website and the services you offer on Just Resources International? Why don't we take a moment and do that?
Well, the Just Resources International was and is the company that I did most of my diversity work through. I'm just repivoting and rebranding. And so I think, if you like, I'm called to be me, not just a label. So you will interact now with the Shelley Collins organization, and the website is shelleycollins.co.uk. I'm going to be releasing a series of programs around, especially for women, about young women, about women of value and worth. But my full range of diversity training, basic understanding of equality and diversity, levels 2, 3, and 4 in terms of academic qualifications and diversity, those programs are available. And I can train for corporates where they are looking at things like bullying and harassment in the workplace. I train people how to be investigators in the workplace, how to do that. And then on the personal side, I do personal coaching, personal development. I do workshops and seminars because I want people to discover about themselves and invest in themselves. So, and the other thing that I am doing at the moment, I've just been appointed the global head of gender equality and diversity for an organization called Nations of Women, which is about empowering 1 billion women worldwide to change the world and to make an impact in line with the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN. So on Facebook, if you look up Nations of Women, if you look at the Shelley Collins organization, you will find me. But please know that if you have any questions, if you have any comments, and to you, if there's anything you want me again to speak on or to contribute, I am more than happy to come back again. So thank you.
So kind. You are so kind. I call Shelley a legend, and I definitely think you all can see why. This has been an honor. This is really full of life lessons. I put this podcast together thinking, oh, we can give parents different ideas, different things they can consider. But this episode has been so much more than that. And that is because you took time to give of yourself. So I would recommend for everybody to reach out, to follow Shelley on social media, look at her website. The corporations and organizations that don't know how to deal with some of these tricky situations we are in. I don't know why you haven't already called Shelley. Maybe you didn't know about her before, but you should definitely be calling Shelley now. Shelley, your phone should be ringing off the hook because there are a lot of organizations that still need help with this work. All of us individually still need help with this work. So again, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. This one is one we can put a special tag next to and say, you need to stop what you're doing. Don't multitask, sit down and listen, because this is more than a treat is an understatement. I cannot thank you enough, and I look forward to partnering with you in any way I can in the future. It's an honor.
Thank you so much. It's an honor speaking with you. Bye-bye.
So we are going to wrap up this episode of Empowered Teen Self-Esteem. I think we have empowered people with this episode today. I think we're living up to our name. So please continue to follow us. Continue to stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Empowered Teen Self-Esteem. Please follow Kids More Sugar on social media. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel to show that you support this content. And you can visit our website at kidsmoresugar.com to learn more about our free online kids program. Thank you.